The Great Depression from 1928 to 1939 is considered by most, if not all, to be the worst economic catastrophe in modern US history. The stock market lost 89% of its value, the national unemployment rate soared to over 25%, and over 15 million Americans found themselves jobless, resulting in breadlines that stretched around blocks as over 30% of the nation grappled with poverty. Now, are we at this very moment in another period of economic hardship which rivals that of the Great Depression, one that is unbeknownst to many of today's elites, perhaps veiled by the so-called luxuries of the modern age, but I think felt by many in the working class?
We're living in the silent depression.
We are living in the silent depression.
We are in a silent depression.
The silent depression. You look around, everything seems to be humming along just fine, but underneath the surface, large swaths of the population are living on the edge of economic calamity. More than 60% of Americans in 2023 are living paycheck to paycheck. Americans' credit card debt has hit an all-time high of over $1 trillion. And any excess savings people had are likely to be depleted before the end of the year, according to estimates from the San Francisco Fed. What is going on here? There are no breadlines circling the block per se, but something seems to have gone terribly wrong.
When you compare the Great Depression to today, this is going to absolutely blow your mind. In 1930, during the Great Depression, the average home in America was $3,900, the average car was $600, and the average monthly rent was $18 or $216 a year, and the average salary was $1,300 for the year. Fast forward to today, it is $436,000 for the average home, $48,000 for the average car, and the average rent is $2,000 a month or $24,000 a year, and we have a $56,000 income for the average American right now. So if you look back to the Great Depression, the house was only 3 times the average salary. Now it is 8 times the average salary. The car was 46% of the salary. The car today is 85% of the salary. And here's the craziest part. The rent was 16% of the average salary. It is now 42% of the average salary.
A little shocking when you look at a comparison like that, right? I want you to take a look at this map. The hourly wage required in each state to comfortably afford rent. How many of you are comfortably affording rent? Comment below. Food. It is costing exponentially more to feed yourself and your family. Prices are up more than 30% from 2019. So what I'm getting at is if you are struggling financially, it's probably not you. Somehow they figured out this delicate balancing act of technically employing a lot of people, right? Unemployment figures have been at all-time lows, while at the same time paying those people just enough for them to survive and make it back to work the next day, but not much beyond that. But not everybody, especially those from the more establishment economic community, thinks there is such a thing as a silent depression.
Because finding comparable purchases today and trying to control for quality over 90 years is very difficult, especially for each of these little things, the careful and methodological measures of inflation will control for the broadest scope of cost of living. Converting 1932 incomes into today's purchasing power, we find the average person is 4 times better off today than we were back then. Apples-to-apples comparisons with the 1930s show a tremendous improvement in the material quality of life.
I get that technology has improved tremendously in the last 100 years. We now have plumbing in most places. Cars come with way more bells and whistles now. Houses are generally just bigger. But that doesn't mean everything is hunky-dory. That doesn't mean that there's not a deep rot at the core of our economic system. Inequality has never been greater, especially in a country as advanced as the US and considering the amount of abundance that exists in this world. And I think that's the point that's often missed. Inequality is what leads to massive societal turmoil. Professor Martin Daly argues, quote, "The living standards of poor people in developed countries today would be beyond the dreams of kings in the past because of technology. But we do not rate our social status by comparing ourselves with medieval lords. We do so by looking at those around us." The point is, I think people can accept that there are flaws in every type of system, but when it becomes apparent that the system itself is rigged, which it is 100% rigged, that's when the fabric of society rips into 1,000 pieces. Today, the corporation and the government have become one. I think the movie Idiocracy comes to mind for a lot of people. Others maybe think fascism, a la Mussolini's famous quote, "The merger of corporations and the state." Either way, when business and governments collude for the singular goal of making as much money as possible, that necessitates the reduction of everything: nature, machinery, food, shelter, and yes, even humans, down to nothing more than widgets in service of profit. So what can we do? We can, of course, push for change through the electoral system and through nonviolent direct action. But recently I came across something very interesting from academia. There's a book written by historian Walter Scheidel called The Great Leveler: Violence and the History of Inequality from the Stone Age to the 21st Century. He says, quote, "It is almost universally true that violence has been necessary to ensure the redistribution of wealth at any point in time." Interesting. Surveying long stretches of human history, Scheidel says that the big equalizing moments in history may not have always had the same cause, but they shared one common root: massive and violent disruptions of the established order. Okay, so I have to clarify for YouTube, we are talking purely academically here. Among the wide varieties of catastrophes that level societies, Scheidel identifies what he calls the four horsemen: mass mobilization or state warfare, transformative revolution, state collapse, and plague. The argument is that inequality does not go down by itself because we have economic development, and that only violent intervention can make that happen. Once again, just to be clear, I'm sharing this hopefully to inspire you to do your own reading and study of history to further our collective knowledge on the theories of change and how we can create a more just society. To reiterate, in a purely academic way. That is all from me this week. Let me know what you think. How are you doing? Let's talk in the comment section below. Also, if you found this video to be helpful, please share it with your friends and family, subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and as always, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.